Hi everyone, I'm Joe. Today it's time for me to do my monthly reading wrap-up for September 2022. September was an interesting month and a good reading month, albeit one that was very, very light indeed, as I only read 2 books. But this was predictable, as at the end of August and at the start of September, I was in Chicago, Illinois, in America, for the Worldcon, and I knew this would drastically affect my reading because, of course, especially when I'm returning, of course, I am playing catch up with things that I obviously didn't do when I was in America. So I knew this would affect my reading and limit my reading pretty severely, especially as the 2 books that I read in this month were very long, very heavy going books that frankly sort of killed my enthusiasm for reading for well over a week afterwards as well. So, I chose a slightly unfortunate choice of books, I suppose, in that sense, but I am glad I read what I read. And the first book I'm going to talk about, however, is one from August, in fact, because at the end of August I was obviously distracted by making sure I had everything ready to go on holiday to Chicago, and this book completely slipped my mind and I didn't think of it. So I will talk about Thrice, the Brinded Cat Hath Mew'd, written by Alan Bradley. This is the 8th book in the Flavia Deleuze series, of which there are currently 10 if I'm not mistaken. And this is a murder mystery series, and one that I am extremely enjoying. I mean, the 8th book, so I'm obviously enjoying it at this point. And it's all about, the main character is indeed called Flavia Deleuze. She is a young girl. She has a massive interest in chemistry. Obviously that is where the murder mystery aspect comes in. Basically, she keeps finding herself in situations where she discovers a dead body, and using her knowledge and her intellect, which are high, she will then try to solve whatever this crime may be. There's a detective who is obviously officially on the case because she is obviously young, she shouldn't be having anything to do with it, but he realises her value, but he can't acknowledge it. So there's always an interesting dynamic between them two. And this is an interesting one because this is directly related to her family at this point. Her father is rather ill in hospital, and so she's distracted by this, but she finds a dead body, and well, that leads to a rather interesting case, let's say. And yeah, again, this is really well written, interesting, different from what I would expect, and got a few unexpected twists and turns, and I would greatly recommend this, although not as your first book within this series, because obviously this is the 8th. Start with the first, and if you like the first, move onwards. I obviously have, and indeed I will be reading further books almost certainly in October, in fact. So now on to the 2 books that are directly related that I read in September, and those are books 2 and 3 in the Helliconia trilogy series. And this is indeed that very large SF Masterworks omnibus trilogy that I read the first one of last month in August. I read books 2 and 3 this month, and this basically killed my reading ability for the month, because while I did enjoy it, this is frankly massive. I mean, as you can see, and heavy, and I just couldn't read anything else frankly whilst reading this. This was just all consuming for the month. Yes, one of them things I don't mind. It was interesting. The 2 books in question that I read this month were Helliconia Summer and Helliconia Winter. It starts off last month. I read Helliconia Spring. This is basically a life cycle novel of this planet that is very much Earth-like. It's got 2 suns, however, and these 2 suns create a normal year and a great year. A great year is many thousands of years, and it basically creates essentially a continuous cycle between a extreme ice age and an extreme heat wave, and almost like a heat death of the planet or close to it. And it's the life cycle of civilization that you get from the winter, this ice age. You have the people sort of struggling through, trying not to be wiped out and become extinct. You've got these alien creatures called Phagors, which are adapted to living in the weather. But humans and these Phagors don't get on, so there's always that conflict there. Then you obviously, over hundreds and hundreds of years, thousands of years, the weather changes. It will get warmer, milder into the summer part, and it'll actually be extremely hot. Weathers will be not survivable because it actually becomes too hot. Crops do not grow as well because obviously there is an upper limit for crops and grazing animals to tolerate. So this is just as bad as the extreme winter. And then obviously it starts in the third book, Helliconia Winter, to go back to the winter where the book started. But it's that evolutionary style between what the difference is between the extreme winter, the extreme summer, and everything that's in between those two things. How does that affect civilization? How does that affect people on a personal level? Because this book is an interesting one, this whole trilogy, because each one is about a different set of characters, almost completely unrelated to one another, apart from obviously they have this sort of history of early characters, kind of knowledgeable to them vaguely, but only they three. So it's an interesting novel, one that I'm glad I read. Honestly, I don't think I'm going to be rereading it, probably ever, because at least not in this format. I will reread it if I can get hold of different copies of it. Reading it in this format, no. This was a chore to read, I'm not going to deny. If I had these in individual, the three books that make up the trilogy, yes, I will definitely read it. I think it might be well worth that in the future because it had some fantastic ideas. The enthusiasm from Brian Aldiss for this subject. I mean, this is cast as a planetary romance, which, I mean, and this is basically, this whole novel is one of the most well known for this very specific, sort of idea of the planetary romance. I'm not going to describe planetary romance because I'm not very good at describing it. Just search up on what that means if you're interested, and it's an interesting description. And overall, I would recommend this book. Maybe you can get hold of it in a different format though than this monster thing. It'll be a bit lighter and a bit more manageable, frankly, and a lot more enjoyable. I mean, I enjoyed it honestly, but I would have enjoyed it more if it hadn't have been so heavy that it was actually hurting my wrist to read, and therefore I could only read it for a short time and then have a very large break. Hence why I didn't read anything else this month. And with that said, that is it for this month. So if you have read any of these, not many of them, but if you have, then please leave a comment, or if you have suggestions on books you think I might like based on these, and again, please leave a comment. I'm always open to new authors and new genres, new subgenres, and so on. And with that said, that is it. So all my social media links can be found in the description box below, and I will link the video where I talked about my trip to Chicago for the WarCon in the description box below as well, because that was actually the previous video last week, and that was actually quite a long video, and I'm quite pleased with that video. And overall, I'm very happy with my trip and happy with my overall month reading, considering it was interrupted, let's say, by obviously travel. And that's it, that is it for this video. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you another day. Bye for now.